James Koshiba is the founding executive director of Kanu Hawaii, which has, among a variety of other efforts, worked to organize parents and community members to end Furlough Fridays. James began his education work as a fellow with the Annenberg Institute for School Reform in the 1990s, and over the years has worked with educational organizations such as the Hawaii P20 Initiative and Hawaii Change and the Hawaii Change Leaders Group.
Okay, so my perspective on this is a little bit different from the rest of the panel. I'll explain what my lens is that I put on this stuff, and I'll try to be brief. I come at this work right now as a community organizer, and what I see is an opportunity, a window of opportunity that's opened up now. It was started by the school furloughs, and it's evolved into a much bigger conversation, but essentially I see a moment of enhanced citizen awareness and citizen outrage and citizen energy to actually do something about education, which does not often exist. Yeah? And so the question that I come at this with is, what do we direct that energy towards? And do we try to tap its political voice? Do we try to tap its volunteer energy? And then what do we aim it at, or what do we organize around? And I have to say that I believe, my humble opinion is that governance is actually the wrong place to start. In part that's because I have yet to see convincing evidence that a change in governance will actually produce improvements in teaching and learning, actually affect what happens in the classroom, which is another piece of the lens I bring to this. And also because I feel like there are other places where the energy might be more productively pointed to. The other piece of perspective that I bring to this has mostly been informed by working with principals and by being mentored by someone who was an educator and a leader in the national school reform effort, a man named Ted Sizer, who passed away recently. But his message to his students was the one most important message that must come from a school and everything in the school system is, we expect much of you. Yeah. And that really resonated with me, and I still bring that perspective to this work. So I guess all that said, when I look at education and where to point grassroots energy at, or what pieces of the puzzle we should be working on, I frame it this way. I would say that starting with that statement of we expect much of you, the way I frame the problem is that we have a culture, a pervasive culture of cynicism and low expectations. As parents, as community members, as teachers, and as citizen leaders. Yeah? High expectations would mean that we expect the best of people, we make it clear we're willing to support them in their pursuit of excellence, and right now we have the opposite of that. And I'll give 3 quick examples, and through those examples, hopefully illustrate where I think some places are to point some energy at. Yeah. One is, I think we expect the worst of teachers. Okay. Our rules and tests are designed to prevent the worst cases of abuse and neglect, instead of assuming that teachers want to be excellent at their craft and then supporting them in that work. I think No Child Left Behind is a classic example of this. We've tried to legislate and regulate people into excellence instead of saying we assume that you want to be great and what supports do you need to be there. A teacher friend of mine put it best, I think, when I was asking her about the impact of No Child Left Behind on her work. And she said, it's essentially, it leaves little to the imagination and creativity. And what that means is that I can't be passionate about teaching. And if I can't be passionate about teaching, then how am I supposed to inspire kids to be passionate about learning? Yeah. That doesn't mean that teachers should get a free pass, okay? But it does mean that the assumption should be people enter the teaching profession to pursue excellence, and then there have to be systems in place to support that. That includes systems of evaluation, of feedback, systems of accountability that hold teachers accountable for bad performance, and systems to reward teachers for good teaching instead of just seniority. Yeah? And I agree with what almost every panelist has said about the need to make it easier for administrators and principals in particular to control their human resources and to put some of those systems in place. A second example, I think, of low expectations is that schools expect the worst of parents. Yeah. And I think what that leads to is, and this kind of relationship has been built up over years and over the formation of habits. And so I think when I talk to my teacher friends, they're very reticent about involving parents in education and in their school. They say, you know, all we get from parents is complaints and advocacy, and what we really need is their support at home. And then if we let them into the school, you know, we'd like them to listen to what it is that we need their support with. But I think that barrier actually sets up kind of an unhealthy relationship. And actually, it means that schools miss out on important opportunities. You know, one really instructive thing that I've seen play out in the Furlough Friday scenario is how charter schools have responded to the budget cuts and the school furloughs. So at least from what I've seen, charter schools have responded well, and in many cases better than some of our other public schools in responding to this crisis, in part because they're able to mobilize community and parent passion and energy in the working of their school. So a lot of parents have pitched in, community members have pitched in. That's meant resources, that's meant volunteers, that's meant being able to keep the school open on Fridays and continue to serve students well. And so I think that's a for instance of how parent energy and passion, we all know that parents, we're not going to be able to find anyone that cares more about their kids than that kid's parent. But the question is how we tap into that energy in a productive way, how we give parents a way to plug in to a school in a way that's different than just complaining or advocating. And we have some systems like that in place. We have school community councils. We have efforts to partner with parents and community organizations, but I think there's more work to be done in that area. And then the third, for instance, of low expectations is I think we're sending the message that we expect very little of our kids right now. And the clearest example of that is Furlough Fridays itself. I mean, aside from all the evidence of how important that instructional time is for kids, I think there's also a much more insidious underlying message that education doesn't matter that much, and that for all the lip service we give to the next generation so important and critical, and you guys are the future, that is just all talk, yeah. And kids are not stupid. They can pick up on these signals from us, you know. And so I think, you know, what flipping that around would mean is first, of course, ending the school furloughs, but it also means other kinds of steps like combating the idea that if we hold students to a high standard, we're afraid they're going to fail. So we shouldn't put that standard in place. Yeah, I think those standards need to be much richer than they are now. But for instance, we shouldn't say things like a college prep curriculum is just too hard for my kids, and so I'm not gonna set the bar there. I go back to Professor Sizer's statement about the most important message being that we expect much of you, because wherever we set that bar of expectation for kids is where they'll gravitate to. Yeah, that expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The last thing I'll say, I guess, is that I feel like in addition to kind of a culture of low expectations that we have right now, is instead of expecting something clear and demanding of schools, we kind of expect them to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Yeah, and I think this goes back to Joan's point, and we've in fact delegated a lot of our responsibility as a community to schools. So whereas at one time they were responsible for a piece of education, and we live by the motto that it takes a village to raise a child, now schools are expected to be a counselor, health provider, social worker, in addition to, you know, a lot of the work that parents and community used to do. And so the last point I guess I would make is that we need to, as everybody in this room needs to reclaim some of that responsibility. Yeah, and I think the challenge for us is to find ways to do that as a first step, find ways to do that in a constructive way, to approach schools and teachers and other players in the system with an open mind to expecting much of each other, yeah, and going to schools and asking, how can I promote excellence in this place? I live right up the street from Central Intermediate, or Central Middle School, and my commitment, I decided tonight, will be next week, I'm gonna go down to Central Middle School, I'm gonna try to meet with the principal, and I'm gonna ask that question, how can I support excellence in this place? So, thank you.